All right, let's just jump right in. Imagine you're a doctor. It's the dawn of the 20th century and you're surrounded by minds in chaos. The accepted wisdom of the day? It's just a broken brain, a biological problem. But one man, Carl Jung, he looked into that chaos and he didn't just see a disease. He saw a world, a hidden symbolic landscape inside every one of us. This is the story of his incredible fight to prove that the human psyche is a real, explorable place, a world just as tangible, just as consequential as the one we see all around us. And this quote, right here, it just lays it all out. Jung wasn't just tweaking a theory, he was basically declaring war on the entire materialistic worldview of his time. He argued that this deeply ingrained dogma, this belief that only physical stuff is real, was literally blinding doctors, preventing them from actually seeing, let alone helping, their patients.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by exploring Jung's core idea of this world within. Then we'll look at the scientific wall of dogma he was up against. After that, we'll dive into his method for actually deciphering the soul's language, see its terrifying power in action, and finally, we'll grapple with the profound duty this all places on any doctor of the mind.
All right, so let's begin with the central mystery. When someone's mind seems to break from what we all call reality, what is actually going on in there? Is it just random noise from a faulty biological machine? Or could all the bizarre fantasies, the strange new words, the terrifying visions, could they actually be a message, a kind of language from a hidden part of ourselves? This right here, this is the fundamental question that drove Jung, and it completely reframed the entire field of psychiatry. See, instead of just trying to quiet the symptoms, Jung started asking, what if we need to listen to them? What if the madness is actually trying to tell us something vital, not just about the patient, but about the very structure of the human psyche itself? Now, to really get how radical this was, you have to understand the world Jung was up against. In the early 20th century, psychiatry was absolutely convinced it had the answer. The mind, they said, was just an after effect, a ghost in the machine of the brain. Everything, they believed, would eventually be explained by simple biology.
So you can see the battle lines were drawn crystal clear. On one side, you've got the establishment view. Mental illness is a brain disease. Anything the patient says is basically meaningless gibberish, and the unconscious is just a fantasy. But on the other side, you have Jung's emerging view, that the illness has psychic roots, that its expressions are a symbolic language, and that the unconscious is a powerful, autonomous reality. I mean, this wasn't just a small disagreement. These were two completely different ways of seeing a human being.
Jung put it so bluntly. He saw that the medical training of his day was basically an exercise in systematic ignorance. Doctors were literally being taught to disregard the most important piece of data they had, the patient's own experience. Their inner world was dismissed before it was even explored.
So how do you explore a world that nobody else even believes exists? Well, Jung's answer was to develop a whole new method. Not just a method of treatment, but a method of listening, of interpretation. He became an explorer, setting out to map what he called the locked regions of the psyche.
A key concept for him was this phrase, abaissement du niveau mental. Now, it sounds super complex, right? But the idea is actually simple and honestly pretty profound. In states like psychosis, the normal barrier between our conscious and unconscious mind gets weaker. It's like the tide going out, revealing all the strange structures and creatures on the seabed that are normally hidden. For Jung, this wasn't a malfunction. It was an opportunity, a window into the deepest layers of the mind.
And this was the crucial difference. Where his colleagues saw only the chaotic gibberish of a sick brain, Jung saw structure. He saw a language. He realized the bizarre delusions, the strange associations, they weren't random at all. They had a kind of syntax, a grammar, a meaning. The psychiatrist's job, he argued, was to become a translator.
You can just feel the excitement in his words here. For him, it was like deciphering ancient hieroglyphics. It was that thrill of proving that behind the veil of madness, there was actual meaning. He had found a key to unlock the code of the human soul. But this wasn't just some academic exercise in decoding symbols. Jung went on to show, through some really shocking case studies, that these unseen forces could have devastating, even lethal consequences in the real world.
Okay, so take this case. A 9-year-old boy commits this horrifying act of violence against his own sister. And from the outside, it is completely inexplicable. There's no motive, no clear reason. He's not some monster, he's just a child. So what on earth happened? Well, after some careful persuasion, the boy reveals his secret terror. He says he's being haunted by a little man with a beard, a figure that only he can see. This figure frightens him so much that he clings to his teacher and hides in the loft at home. This isn't just a child's fantasy, it's the key to the entire mystery.
And right here, in the boy's own simple words, is the terrifying heart of his experience. When Jung asks what this little man wants, the boy says he wanted to put the blame on me. He feels like he's being possessed by a force, an intention that isn't his own.
And here was Jung's incredible insight. The little man wasn't some external demon, but an internal one. It was the boy's own destructive instinct, which his conscious mind couldn't accept, so it got personified as this separate being. A second self from his unconscious had taken control, driving him to act. The psyche was literally trying to kill.
And this wasn't just a one-off case. Jung saw this same dynamic again and again. He talks about these respectable men who committed horrific murders, seemingly out of nowhere. And he traced the source back to their saintly wives, who were unconsciously projecting their own unacknowledged evil onto their husbands, essentially programming them to act out the darkness they denied in themselves. The psyche, as Jung showed, doesn't just stay inside one person's head.
So, if the psyche is real, right? If it has this kind of immense power, what does that mean for the doctor? Well, it means everything changes. The doctor's duty is no longer just to manage symptoms, but to engage with a patient's entire inner world.
So we can really boil Jung's whole argument down to a few key takeaways. First, the psyche is a primary reality. It's the lens through which we experience everything, including our own bodies. Second, its contents always have meaning, even when they look like chaos. Third, to ignore that meaning is a profound failure of a doctor's duty. And finally, the very act of understanding, of meeting the patient in their inner world, is itself a powerful tool for healing. And this leads to some incredibly difficult ethical questions. Jung brings up a case where a patient is absolutely convinced they need a radical, irreversible operation. Now, if you take their inner reality seriously, do you help them get it, even if it violates every professional ethic in the book? There are no easy answers when you accept that the psyche is real. It forces a doctor to weigh their own conscience against the established rules.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Jung's entire career was a fight to open doors to the locked regions of the psyche that the science of his day had declared off-limits. His battle was against the materialism of the early 20th century. So the question for us today is, what are our blind spots? What parts of human experience, what mysteries of the mind, do our modern dogmas still prevent us from truly seeing?